So moving. Congratulations, Dr. Kastner. Thank you, Francis Collins, Robbie, and Carolyn. Thank you very much for sharing your stories with us. Our final award tonight is a new one in the Sammies lineup. It is the Spirit of Service Award, which recognizes individuals outside of government who've made significant contributions to public service and the public good, either by helping government be more innovative and effective, or by advocating for effective government and for those who serve. I'm going to point out that this award is not your typical trophy. It is an original sculpture that was designed for Sam and Ronnie Hayman by the late Robert Indiana, as you know, one of America's most notable pop artists. After the presentation, we are going to hold a fireside chat, minus the fire, that you will not want to miss. But here to present the award now is Allison Smith. She was recognized as the winner of the 2018 People's Choice Award this past summer. Allison works for the Naval Surface Warfare Center and discovered how to use nanoparticles to mark sensitive military equipment and prevent the use of counterfeit or defective parts during production. Counterfeiting is relatively easy and a significant problem with microelectronics, I'm told. Allison's work will go a long way toward protecting our service members and our nation. Congratulations on your accomplishment, Allison.
Thank you. Before I introduce Jeff Bezos, I have a personal story to share regarding Amazon. My significant other is a civilian scientist with the Navy, and he travels to Afghanistan for 6 to 8 months at a time in support of our Special Operation Forces through a mobile technology repair program. On his first trip there, I shipped a couple of care packages, trying to be the supportive partner that I am. And when the second package took forever to arrive, he called me to say there was no need for me to ship him any more care packages. He could get exactly what he wanted and faster by ordering on Amazon. The shipments arrived in only 2 days. Thus, I was replaced by Amazon, and I have not sent him a care package in 4 years. Luckily, I remain the prime person in his life. In addition to founding Amazon, Jeff has branched out into new fields that benefit our nation and our federal government. He founded Blue Origin, an aerospace manufacturer and space flight services company that is developing reusable launch vehicles. His vision is to lower the cost of access to space, making it possible for heavy industry and millions of people to move beyond Earth's surface and atmosphere. The company has worked with NASA to test new equipment for space travel, such as medical technology and a new cooling system. In the area of national security, Amazon Web Services is delivering secure cloud computing services that help the intelligence community, military service members, and first responders collect, analyze, and share mission-critical information. 5 years ago, Jeff bought the Washington Post, and in short order, he restored the company's financial viability so it could continue to uncover important stories about government and those who serve. And just last month, Jeff and his wife, Mackenzie, launched a $2 billion fund to help homeless families and create preschools in low-income communities. It is my great pleasure to present the first Sammy Spirit of Service Award to Jeff Bezos.
So we've known each other for a while, and I want to share a personal story about Jeff, loosely about you, that I think is revealing about how you move.
Why am I so nervous all of a sudden?
This just a year ago, he and I were at a star-studded event that I happened to have my 10-year-old son, Walker, at. And I dragged the son to this grown-up event, and he was highly skeptical about the whole thing. Whenever there are this many grown-ups in a room, he knows it's not going to be fun. And I said, there are going to be a lot of famous people. And so we're sitting at a table, and I'm trying to point out the people who he should be interested in. Reese Witherspoon walks by. He has no idea who she is. Tom Hanks walks by. No idea who he is. Oprah walks by. Blank look. Jeff walks by, and he goes, Pitbull's here. And I said, yeah, he is. He went up and said hi to Jeff. He watched Jeff like a hawk for the next 45 minutes, and he left. To this day, he thinks that's Pitbull. Now, that man can be who he is and still do a fair simulation of Pitbull. I think it's a very telling fact about you. Now, you were in the news today, and I want to start just with that.
Sure.
You raised the minimum wage of 250,000 Amazon workers to $15 an hour. It made my heart do a little pitter-patter, but then I saw what you said. You said something about we listened to our critics and we thought about it. And I thought to myself, I never do that. I don't listen to my critics. My critics are idiots. and I thought, what an interesting admission it was. So I would love just to start. I would like to have you first kind of take us through the thought process of why you did what you did.
Okay.
But also talk a little bit about how you deal with your critics, because I think that probably applies to everybody in this.
That for sure would be applicable to, I'm just guessing, has any government agency ever been criticized for anything? Probably not, but if it were to happen, you should be ready. I talk a lot about willingness to be misunderstood. That's a really important thing to have. If you're going to do anything new or different in the world, it is going to be misunderstood, sometimes by well-meaning critics, sometimes by self-interested critics. You'll get all kinds. And it's okay. It's all part of the process. The only way to avoid criticism altogether is to be completely conventional in everything you do. And so how do you respond to the criticism? What do you do? What's the right thing to do? Well, I think the first thing you do is you ask, are the critics right? You listen, you ask, are they right? Or even if they're not completely right, is there some piece of it that's right, that you can be inspired by? And then if you decide, by the way, that the answer is no, that you believe, you have conviction that what you're doing is the right course, then no force in the world should be able to move you. You should have a deep keel. But if you decide that your critics, that there is something, then you should change. And I give you an example from the early days of Amazon of one where we refused to change. We were small enough that most people didn't pay much attention to us or care about us. I'm taking you way back to like 1995, 1996. We pioneered this thing called customer reviews. And I got a letter one day from a publisher, a book publisher, that said, hey, you must not understand your business. You're losing sales because you're allowing negative customer reviews on the book detail pages. Why don't you just put positive reviews? And I thought about this, and I thought, no, he's wrong. We don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help people make purchase decisions. It was a different framing. And so getting to today's news, we listened to our critics, and we decided the framing that we have been using all these years is competitive compensation. We look at what other job opportunities there are and what the competitive compensation levels are, and we offer competitive compensation and actually non-competitive, world-leading benefits packages, but just competitive compensation. And so in light of this, thinking about this and trying to decide, do we want to change, we realized, we just made a decision, well, you can offer competitive compensation or you can decide to lead. And as soon as we framed it that way, we're like, let's decide to lead.
It's a great
and I think people will follow.
Where do you take it? How do you lead, aside from by example?
Oh, I think, actions speak louder than words on something like this. So, you can talk a lot about it, but by actually changing the minimum wage to 15, that's a much more powerful thing to do than to kind of lecture about it.
And what was it the critics said that caught your eye?
Basically, they were saying, if you read between the lines, because a lot of the specific criticism was not correct, but if you read between the lines, what they really wanted us to do, they said, because you could also say, look, there's so many companies. There are all the fast food companies. There's, the baristas, and there's, like, wait a second, why are you focusing on us? But what they're really saying is, we're focusing on you because you're a leader, and we want you to lead. That's what they're actually saying. And as soon as you recognize it that way, instead of it feeling like criticism, it feels empowering. They're asking us to lead because we're a symbol of an innovative, iconic company. We're a gold standard for innovation. We should lead.
Tell me what you made of tonight. Had you heard of the Sammies?
No. So I had not heard of the Sammies, I'm sorry to say, until Charlie Bolden invited me here.
Charlie Bolden?
Charlie Bolden, the former NASA administrator, he can't be here tonight because he's at a different conference in Europe tonight. But he invited me to do this, and I said, what's the Sammies? And he explained the whole thing to me. And I thought, wow, what a delightful, cool thing to do. So many people in civil service are unsung heroes. They only get sung about when something goes wrong.
You've thought that?
Many times. My grandfather was a civil servant his entire life until he retired to the ranch.
Well, talk about that. What did he do?
So this is a guy, we called him Pop. He was really an additional father for me. My mother, who is very young and healthy and a powerhouse, she's a badass. She had me when she was 17 years old in Albuquerque, New Mexico, while she was still in high school, which, believe it or not, being pregnant in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1964 was not cool. And so my grandfather, this guy who was a civil servant all his life, went to bat for her with the principal because the principal wanted to kick her out of school. And my grandfather negotiated a deal with the principal. The principal finally agreed that she could stay and finish high school on the condition that she participated in no after-school extracurricular activities and that she couldn't have a locker. I don't know what that was all about, but my grandfather, being a wise and intelligent person, quickly said, deal, that's done. So she got to finish high school. And you might think this is, for me, I reserve my highest admiration for people who have, abusive parents, several parents, and somehow they still break that cycle. I didn't have that. I had the best situation. And my dad is a Cuban immigrant. He came here as part of Operation Pedro Pan. He was 16 years old. He got put in an Everglades refugee camp for 2 weeks and then picked up by a Catholic mission in Delaware with 15 other Cuban boys. And he's also an incredible role model. But they were so young that my grandfather, this guy, after he had retired from civil service, he was working as a rancher on a family ranch in South Texas. We called him Pop. And he took me for every summer from age 4 to 16. I got to spend 3 months with him. And he started out doing it basically to give my super young parents a break because they had a kid at such a young age. And it really worked out well for me because you learn different things from grandparents. So, but his first job, he was born in 1915. His first job was, kind of a Depression-era job as a messenger. He worked in Washington, D.C. as a government messenger. When World War II, when the U.S. entered World War II, he went into the Navy and was on a destroyer, the USS Nunzer in the Atlantic. And then he ended up after the war, he came back. He worked for naval operations for a while, and then he worked for DARPA, and he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission.
He was a pretty senior figure in DARPA, wasn't he?
He was. I don't remember what his title was, but deputy something or rather. And And he was a fairly senior figure at the Atomic Energy Commission, too. He ran all of the Albuquerque
So you would have been aware at a very early age of the role the government played in innovation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he told stories all the time. He was a very quiet, introverted sort of person, but one-on-one, he was a storyteller. And there's so many pop stories. I could regale you for hours, and you would be laughing so hard. I'm going to tell you just one because it's so worth hearing. And this one's a little out of character for him because he's quite a cautious, careful person. One day he's driving himself to the ranch, and he pulls up to the main gate off of the highway. The ranch is a dozen miles out of town. He lived in town, drives up to the ranch. He's all alone. And he gets out of the truck to open the gate, and he realizes he hasn't put the car in park or in neutral, and it's rolling towards the gate. And he thinks to himself, I have just enough time to unlatch the gate, throw the gate open. The truck's going to roll right through. It's actually going to be a time saver. And he almost gets the gate unlatched when the truck hits the gate, and it catches his thumb between the gate and the fence post, and it rips all the flesh off the end of his thumb. And it's dangling there by a little piece of skin. And he's so angry at himself for being so dumb that he takes that piece of flesh, rips it off, and throws it in the brush. And he drives himself to the emergency room, which is about 16 miles away. He gets to the emergency room, and they said, this is no problem. We can reattach that. Where is that piece of flesh? He's like, well, I ripped it off and threw it in the brush. And they say, no problem. We're going to go find it. So they jump in the car with him. He takes them back to where he threw the piece of thumb away. They search for an hour. They don't find it. So probably some bird ate it or something. I mean, who knows what happened? It's gone. So they drive him back to the emergency room, and they're like, you have two choices. You're going to have a skin graft. You can either have a skin graft from your stomach. We'll sew your thumb to your stomach. You have to leave it there for 6 weeks. That's the best way. You'll have more sensitivity in your thumb. Or we can just take a patch of skin from your butt and sew it on. And that's the faster way, but you won't have as much sensitivity. And he's like, well, I'm a rancher. It doesn't really matter. I don't need a lot of sensitivity, and I can't have my thumb sewn to my stomach for 6 weeks. So let's go with the butt option. So they cut a little piece of flesh, and they transplant it onto his thumb. And the vivid memory that I have of this, my grandfather was definitely in the mornings anyway, a creature of routine, as many of us are. And he would every morning sit there, eat his cereal while shaving with an electric razor, and while reading the newspaper. And he would shave for a ridiculously long period of time, needless, like 15 minutes while doing. But the vivid memory I have is that at the very end, after shaving his face for 15 minutes, he would take that electric razor and make 2 quick passes over his thumb because his thumb grew butt hair. It's an absolutely true story. I've seen it.
So I'm sitting here, I'm trying to make this relevant here. But what my takeaway is the first government employee you ever knew had his ass up his thumb.
That's very quick.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So you grow up without the American myth that the government is something boring and lacking innovation.
Oh, for sure. The Atomic Energy Commission, and I also I fell in love with space travel, watching
So explain
Neil
that.
Armstrong.
How does that happen?
Well, is watching Neil Armstrong step onto the surface of the moon. I was 5 years old, and watching it on little TV with the rest of the world, and I was just captivated, and have thought about that all my life since. And now I actually think it's the most important work I'm doing. I think Blue Origin is incredibly important, and I have a long version of that, which we don't have time for me to tell you tonight, but the basic idea is we've sent robotic probes to every planet in the solar system. Believe me, this is the best one. All of the other planets, not so good. You don't want to live there. We have to protect this planet. And at the same time, you don't want a civilization of stasis where you have to cap population and cap energy usage per capita. That will interfere with liberty. It'll be less interesting. I want my grandchildren and their grandchildren to continue to have plentiful resources, and I'd love for there to be 1 trillion humans in the solar system. We can't do that on Earth, but we can do it in the solar system. There's so much energy and resources out there. But what makes it hard is that space travel is just too expensive. The access to space is so costly, and so that's what Blue Origin is working on, reusable launch vehicles to dramatically lower the cost. And my vision, what I really want to have happen, is I want to build that low-cost space infrastructure, the heavy lifting. This costs billions of dollars to do, but if you can get that heavy lifting done in a good way, a real operable, reusable launch vehicle, you'll set the next generation up to be space entrepreneurs. Because right now, I think of it as what I've seen in the last 2 decades on the internet. Incredible things have happened very, very quickly. 2 kids in their dorm room created Facebook, which has a $500 billion market cap. It's a giant company. 2 kids in their dorm room today can't do anything big in space. It's not practical. The price of admission is just too high. So what I want to do is lower that price of admission and sort of be the UPS or the FedEx or whatever. That's what we did. Amazon relied on that in the early days. We didn't have to build our own transportation network. We could rely on what UPS had been building for decades. They had put in place the heavy infrastructure. So we're trying to do that with Blue Origin because I think it'll make a giant difference for Earth and civilization.
So NASA triggers this love for you in the first place. When you were listening to these stories tonight, what was going through your mind?
Well, the number one thing going through my mind is the people I saw up on stage tonight are all missionaries. And in my business dealings at Amazon, we often buy companies, smaller companies, smaller than Amazon, but sometimes they're fairly large companies like Whole Foods, but oftentimes they're very small companies. And I'm really mainly looking for one thing when I'm talking to the senior leaders of those companies, and it's, are they missionaries or are they mercenaries? Because the missionaries build better products and services, they care for their customers more. The mercenaries are trying to make a quick buck, they're trying to flip this company and sell it. They built it for sale. They always wanted to sell it, they want to get rid of it. And those companies aren't built to last. So that's the main thing I thought about when I saw these people on stage tonight, all the award winners, and I think it's probably true for everybody who goes into government service and takes that service seriously. You do that because it's a mission, and if the people in the government service could easily make more money in the private sector. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it because they're getting meaning from it. And I tell my kids, you can have a job, you can have a career, or you can have a calling, and you want the calling, whatever that is. Because that is when you're, 80 or 90 years old and in a quiet moment of reflection, telling yourself your most intimate version of your life story. What do you want to have? You want to have meaning in your life. You have to have had a calling.
Why do you think our society has so much trouble appreciating the mission-driven public sector employee?
Well, that's a very good question.
It's not on the list of questions I was supposed to ask him, by the way, but we haven't gotten to those.
None of these have been on the list.
No. But
you gave me a list of questions which so far have not come up at all. I don't know why you bothered.
So here we go.
But it's fine.
Let me change it because we don't have much time. Let me change that question to one that so how do we get young people re-engaged with government service?
Well, I think one thing, and I look at this at Amazon too, so I don't think it's just government service. I think a lot of these government organizations are large organizations. And large organizations have a set of problems, and I worry about this at Amazon. I want us to have the scope and capabilities of a large organization, but the spirit and heart of a small startup company. And I think that so large organizations, one of the things that happens is that the rate of the decision-making velocity goes down. And it gets hard for large organizations to make decisions quickly. It's trivial for a 50-person startup. They make decisions like this. But a 500,000 person company like Amazon or a giant government agency, there's a lot of levels of review and different things, and it can really slow. And by the way, young people don't want to work at a company with a slow decision-making process. It's just not as fun as working at a startup company or somewhere else. So I think you can do that, and even in a large organization, I think if the leadership, this is all about leadership, if the leadership focuses on increasing the decision-making velocity of the organization, everybody will be happier. It's more fun. Everybody will be happier at work, and you'll get younger people because that's what they want. You can also every single person who works in a large company, you get to decide, are you going to help increase the decision-making velocity? Are you going to bring energy to the room? We all have those people, we work with them. As soon as they walk in the room, the whole room, the energy level goes up. Somehow they bring energy to that conference room. And we also all work with people who are the opposite. Like the second they walk in the room, the whole room deflates. And you don't want to be that second guy. You want to be that first guy. And we all get to choose that. We all get to decide that. So anyway, I think you can do it in big organizations. And I think one of the things that makes big organizations less attractive to young people is just sometimes we're slow. And you can fight that, and you can fix it.
So we're out of time. I want to thank you for being here. I think you send a really important signal just being on this stage.
Thank you.
And I'd like to especially thank Max Steyer and the partnership, because I would not have written the book I just wrote without them. They engaged me in this subject. I think it's an earth-shatteringly important subject, and I'm grateful to you. So thank you, and good night.
I would also like to say thank you for all the hard work, and I'm glad you are this room full of missionaries. Thank you very much. And I love the Sammies. I think it's such a good thing to do. Thank you all.
Good night. Don't forget your trophy.
That was good.